Nothing in this podcast or on our website should be construed as medical advice. Consult your healthcare provider for your individual nutritional and medical needs. The information presented is based on our research and is strictly that of the author and not necessarily those of any professional group or other individual.
Hi, I'm Sue Becker from Bread Beckers. Welcome to Sue's Healthy Minutes. I'm so excited you've joined me today, and I hope this episode encourages you and allows you to find the answers you have been praying for the health of you and your family. Today on Sue's Healthy Minutes, it is my great pleasure to interview someone who happens to be very close to my heart. My very own fourth child and third son, David Becker. I am often asked how I incorporated real bread into our family's diet, and was it an easy transition? I usually answer, well, I just started making it and they ate it. I didn't really give them an option, but I never heard them complain. So I always just assumed they liked it. They sure seemed to like it. And I know their friends who came over for sure seemed to like it as well, especially the Ezekiel pancakes. Several kids loved that. But last week, my wonderful podcast producer, Tiffany Thompson, asked if I had ever considered interviewing my son, David, who is actually our store manager now here at Bread Beckers, to get his perspective of growing up with real bread. So I thought, why not? I'm a little nervous. You never know exactly what your children might say about you, but I have not coerced him as to what to say. So this will be an honest viewpoint from a child's opinion, though David is now married with his first child on the way. David, thank you for joining me today. If my math is correct, you were 4 years old when I got rid of commercially processed flour and bread products from our diet and started this whole journey of milling our own flour to make all of our own bread. Bread, muffins, pancakes, cookies, everything. White flour went out the door. So you were, I think, like I said, 4. Being so young when I started on this real bread journey, did you even notice the change in our bread? Was it a big deal to you, or was it just Mom's next cooking adventure?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me. You did leave out favorite child, but that's still.
I have to be careful.
I think you're right. I think I was probably 4, something like that.
I started in 1991.
Yep. So, I don't really have any memory of a store-bought bread before this. So this is I was just born into it, and so I don't really have any memories of anything.
Before bread and after bread.
Before bread and after bread. So I don't really have anything to compare it to. Yeah, it's kind of always just been there. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Mm-hmm. And did you like the bread?
Of course. It was awesome. It was also, it was what was for breakfast, it was what was for lunch, and it was what was for dinner. So it was just mealtime.
The way we ate.
It was just the way we ate. I didn't know any different. I assumed any child woke up to the sound of a grain mill in the morning, and and the smell of fresh baked bread. Like that was my childhood, and I just assumed that was the norm.
Yeah. A friend came into our house one time. She goes, "Your house always smells like cinnamon rolls." And that was because usually I had baked cinnamon bread or something, pancakes. And people always ask, like, what was your meal planning like? And it was just pancakes for breakfast, or biscuits, or rolls, or toast, or eggs, and burnt toast sometimes. And then sandwiches for lunch, or muffins and smoothies. I mean, it just was. Yeah. And then dinner was meat and vegetables and bread.
A slice of bread.
So what was your favorite? You don't have to tell me. I kind of know.
My favorite. I think that's, donuts for sure. Yep. Donuts for sure.
David
which coined me the nickname Donut Dave.
Yep. That was always your birthday, was all you can eat donuts.
All you can eat donuts, which... Now that I am an adult and I make my own bread and I have a child of my own on the way, it's funny. My childhood, I always grew up thinking extra special because on my birthday, my mom would get up at the crack of dawn, grind the grain, make breakfast, this whole thing for me, thinking you slaved away all morning to make me donuts. Now as an adult, They are so easy to make.
Oh, yeah,
so easy.
Hey, I do remember one Christmas morning I did get up and I made donuts for you.
That's true.
You weren't able to be there the Christmas before, or I don't remember exactly why, but I missed a couple of birthdays. You were gone for this year's birthday,
I think
but
so.
I still try to make donuts when I can.
Yep,
so
absolutely.
Anyway, I do have to tell a sweet story on David. David's a peacemaker, and he's always been very kind-hearted. He was not the troublemaker in the family. And shortly after I started making everything with freshly milled flour and using honey as my only sweetener, do you remember this?
Oh, yeah.
It was your birthday. And instead of simply converting one of my tried and true cake recipes, I found a whole wheat flour and honey chocolate cake recipe. I don't even remember where. Thinking surely it's going to be delicious. So I made it the day of your birthday with no trial run beforehand. So just before your party, I was finishing the cake and I had a little sample for you to taste. I don't know if I put a little aside or if I'd cut some off, and I'll never forget that day. In your most kind-hearted way with your big eyes, you looked at me and you said, "It's only a little yucky." And I felt so bad. And so, needless to say, we ended up with a store-bought, chemical-laden, white flour, junky cake, and a lesson learned. I knew right then, don't experiment on the day of the party.
That's
especially
right.
a couple of hours before your friends come. But I soon discovered, though, that I could convert all of my white flour recipes using freshly milled flour with just a few changes, and they're delicious, aren't they?
Yep,
I know
absolutely.
I cooked a cake for Nights Camp that you're a part of when Dad and I did the food for them. And one of the kids, public school, just normal kid, Not that homeschools are not normal, but maybe kind of. But anyway, he came up and said, "This is the best cake I've ever tasted." And it was just made with freshly milled flour, and it was just my basic white yellow cake recipe. And I've even made a couple of the girls' wedding cakes with rave reviews. People love them. So anyway, back to you, David. So what are some of the things that stand out in your mind of growing up on real bread?
Yeah. So again, I didn't, as a child, have any like white flour bread to compare it to, because it was just the norm. And so I really didn't think much of it until as I got older, teenager, playing a lot of sports, ended up moving out, getting an apartment with my lifelong best friend.
Yeah.
And, decided to spread my wings. I worked for the, Bread Beckers for most of my childhood. And so I wanted to get out and do my own thing, try my, skills in the world and a job out there. And so, of course, the first place I landed was delivering pizzas for the local pizza place, and then working my way through management and so on. But when you work in fast food, when you work in pizza specifically, your breakfast, lunch, and dinner is typically pizza.
Yeah.
And, as a young college age bachelor lifestyle sort of thing, it's, when you get home, you're tired and it's Kraft mac and cheese and ramen noodles. It's, I know. I had to go on my own journey, and I will never ever forget the first spring from moving out and doing my own thing and trying to be cheap and thrifty and cut corners. I'll never forget one spring morning, I woke up and my eyes were swollen shut. My nose was swollen. I was stuffy. I could not understand. I was congested, and it took about a week of just being miserable every single morning. Eyes bloodshot, itchy. I didn't know what was going on. I had never experienced anything like it.
Yeah.
And I went to my roommate. I was like, "Dude, I've got all these issues and I can't figure out. Like, I don't feel sick, but it's just heavy and pressure, and I don't know what's going on." And he goes, "Dude, it's allergies." And I'm like, "What do you mean allergies?"
I've never had allergies.
He's like, "Pollen. This is every spring. Everyone gets this." And I'm like, "I've never experienced anything like this." And I'll tell you, I learned that day. The only thing that changed was my eating habits, because I tried to do the cheap thing, and And I immediately got back into making bread. Of course, when you grow up a Becker, you acquire mixers and mills and things. So I had the stuff. I was just, I the same excuse everyone uses. I was busy or I was whatever. And it was a life-changing moment for me. It was a realization that
my life growing up was different.
It was different.
I was trying to think if you had ever, I don't think I ever had to take you to the doctor. I don't think you ever went to the doctor for an illness.
No.
You went for a physical, but...
Yep, and sports injuries.
Well, sure. Yeah,
but,
there was a couple of those.
Couple of those.
Yeah.
No, the only memory I have of ever going to any type of pediatric, it was Dr. Lila Denmark.
Yeah.
We were blessed to have her 20 minutes down the street.
Yeah.
And real quick, the listeners that don't know Dr. Denmark, I believe she was born in 1899.
Yes.
And passed in 2012. So she lived to be 112. We saw her when she was maybe 104, 105.
I think so, yes.
Still practicing medicine.
Yeah.
And so there's
she was amazing.
Great story with her, but you may have told it on the podcast or not. But that's the only, and I think that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
But I mean, I only remember going to her maybe twice for
and that was
for
a physical. You were.
Yeah.
I was when I was preparing to talk with you. I was like, do you ever even remember being sick? And was that a noticeable thing? Which obviously it was once you left home.
Absolutely.
But did you notice that your friends kind of got sick a lot and you didn't?
Yeah.
Or did you just not think about it?
So it's one of those things that you don't think about until
you're out here.
Well, until you experience, because we were homeschooled growing up. But we had, my best friend went to private school. And so his was the normal, Monday through Friday, going to school, bus and all that stuff. And we had lots of friends that went to school, and it seemed like, when I got sick, we would get the flu, the colds and things.
Right.
But like the flu was, you had a fever for 24 hours, maybe. And that was it. And then you had some congestion or whatever. But it was 2 days for the flu.
Yeah, done.
1 day for a cold. And it was like, oh man, I've got a stuffy nose or whatever. And it would be a day. The flu would be 2 days tops. Yeah. And then you'd be fine. Well, but then it's like, the weekend would come and you'd want to go and hang out with your friends, and oh, sorry, they're still sick from 5 and 6 days. It's like, what do you mean they're still sick? It's been,
I got this from them.
It's been 4 days. It's been 5 days. They should be fine by now.
Yeah.
And so, sometimes you would get sick from a friend,
yeah,
and you would get over it, and they would still be sick.
Yeah.
So it's, you don't notice that when you're 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. But then when you start getting older and, realizing things, it's like, why is everyone so sick and I'm not all the time? So, so, I mean, it's one of those things that you realize throughout your life. You kind of pick up on it. You don't notice it right away.
Right.
So,
well, I will back up and tell a little story on Dr. Lila Denmark. She was truly amazing. And I took y'all there. You had to have a physical for camp.
Okay.
So I took you to see her.
Yeah.
She was who we used. And I remember her, there were 5 of you at that time. I think Lydia was still a baby. And she just was like, just bragging on you. And the whole outside of her waiting room, which was her old farmhouse, was full of kids and parents.
Mm-hmm.
She had seen hundreds and hundreds of children over her years. And she just looked at y'all and she said, I have just never seen such a fine looking bunch of kids. And then she said, and none of them have their tonsils.
Yes.
The tonsil story, I think I've told on a podcast previously, but she explained to me that when a baby is born, your tonsils are your first line of defense. They're a little sulfur sac, and God knew where to put them because everything comes into a baby's body through their mouth.
Yep.
And she said that's your little first line of defense when you're born. And then at 6 months or so, your immune system gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And she said your tonsils should atrophy and go away. This not go away, but they shrivel up, just like your muscles are atrophy if you don't use them. And I know this was so intriguing to me because I was a kind of sickly child. I got colds and strep throat a lot growing up. And I know I was a senior in high school. My tonsils were so inflamed, they wanted to remove them. And I didn't for whatever reason. But that story, when she said that to me, it just so intrigued me. And I remember that day, she looked at me and she said, you must be doing something right. Not all of their tonsils are atrophied. And I told her that day, I said, well, I mill my own flour and I make my own bread and I feed them real food. And she put her arm around me and said, honey, you need to go make disciples out of other women. And I said, well, it's exactly what I'm trying to do. And so anyway, some years later, it was just a few years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I had a stopped up ear, then I needed to go to the ear doctor for that to get it unclogged or whatever, see what was going on. And I remember the nurse, you know how whenever you go to the doctor, you know, they're going to check your ears, your throat, your nose, you know. So she, you know, said, say ah, and I said ah, and she goes, And I'm like, when a doctor says, you're like, okay, what's going on? And she goes, have you had your tonsils removed? And I was like, no, why? And she goes, well, I can kind of see that they're kind of there, but they're not. And she goes, it didn't look like you had them removed, but they're not there. And I'm like, yes, my own shriveled, atrophied tonsils. So now I have my own tonsil story right along with y'all.
So it's funny, just one last note on that.
That's okay.
So, you know, you're saying this and you're like, you know, when you go to the doctor, and I'm like, no, I don't know that. I mean, obviously in the movies, I assume it's like the movies. You say, with the popsicle stick, but
true.
Yeah, I didn't have that experience because we just didn't go to the doctor.
I was honestly, when I was preparing to talk to you, I was like, I don't think David ever went to the doctor except for one time. I think you had a dislocated shoulder.
Yep.
But and then the physical. I don't think
that was
ever
it.
had to take you for a sickness.
That's all I remember.
That's a real testimony of starting young. I mean, you really, I mean, I know that you had a little bit because you were 4, so you obviously were eating food, but then I made y'all's baby food and stuff. But you were very young when you started this bread journey. And so you had a very good foundation. But I would, you know, when y'all were all young and at home, I would often have people say to me, you must spend all your time in the kitchen. And you being my child that counts meals, meals are very important to you. You don't like to miss one. I know that's something that I noticed. And I would tell people, no, I actually spend less time in the kitchen now. And I always think of you because before bread, and you were a little young, but before bread, we'd finish breakfast, and we always ate a big breakfast, even before I started making this bread. And but then before we even sat down to do school, we just got the kitchen cleaned up. I would hear y'all in the kitchen getting food, you know. And then after bread, we would eat breakfast, and I can remember distinctly you coming to me and go, it's 2:00. And we'd eat breakfast at 7 or 8.
Yep.
It's 2:00. Are we going to eat lunch? And that was the first time y'all really thought about eating.
Yeah.
That y'all weren't as hungry as much. It was filling. And I just noticed that y'all didn't go in the kitchen looking for food and you didn't snack. We ate a meal and it was good. It held us till the next meal.
Yep, definitely. Definitely. Unless, you know, 11, 12 o'clock, you have fresh rolls coming out of the oven.
True.
Even if you're not very hungry, the smell of hot bread coming out of the oven with a little honey drizzled on top, you can't, I mean, you just can't get away from that.
Yes.
So.
Yes. I can honestly say that was one of the first things I, as a mother, noticed was the bread was filling. It filled y'all up. It satisfied you. And I always tell the story of, before bread, I bought the big long loaf of, Nature's Own whole wheat bread, whatever it was. I'd make the whole loaf in sandwiches and y'all would fight over the last one. After bread, there were 5 of y'all eating at that time. I would make 5 sandwiches, cut them in half, and there would be sandwiches left over. Yep. It would be like, okay, that's interesting. So
like a bread and fishes kind of moment.
I guess so. Feeds the 5,000.
That's right. That's right.
Yes. But when we ate a meal, it typically lasted y'all several hours before anyone even thought about eating. And I know going on trips, we would eat and there was not a lot of snacking and wanting stuff. And y'all even commented, especially when we started doing homeschool shows and hanging out with other friends in hotels and things. One of y'all came to me and said, people, they just eat all the time. They're just constantly snacking. And that just wasn't a part of our
nope, we just didn't snack
lifestyle.
much.
We just didn't need to. And if we did, there was usually fruit and stuff on the table. I know we had that, but there was and snacks are expensive. When people would say, how do you, what's your grocery budget like? And I'm like, it's cheap. It's so much cheaper to eat this way. So anyway, I know Yeah, especially in your teenage years when you and Josh and Caleb were coming along growing faster than could imagine.
yeah.
The bread filled you up and satisfied you. But we already talked about, so as a kid, did you realize that you were seldom sick? But you didn't really, it was just, this was my life.
Yep.
So what's something that stands out in your mind about growing up on real bread? Just the smell of bread always coming around?
Yeah, there was always bread. You know, there was always bread in the house to eat. So even if, you know, you missed a meal or you know, if you and Dad had to go to work together and we had to fend for ourselves. No. Yeah, there was always a bag of muffins. There was always bread to make sandwiches. There was always something
or just
there.
a roll. I know. I remember Lydia, the sixth child, distinctly. Her thing when she would say she was hungry, she wouldn't say I'm hungry. She'd just say I want a roll with honey. So there was always a roll with honey, and y'all learned to with the Ankish room. It wasn't called the Ankish room at the time, but we had the flake mill, the oat roller.
Yep.
Y'all would roll oats right into your cereal bowl and put the frozen blueberries
and put the blueberries in there or the strawberries.
Yeah.
Yep. And then just pour a little milk over it.
It was just delicious.
And it was a great treat and filling again.
Yeah.
The whole grains, like a bowl of cereal. It's, you know, again, going back to my rebellion days.
I wouldn't call them rebellion. You're independent.
Yeah, you're independent, but you eat a whole box of cereal in one sitting because it's just.
Yep.
You just needed something and then you're hungry.
Yeah.
An hour and a half later. It's different.
Yeah. That's one of my visual aids in the Healthy Eating Simplified class that I teach is the economics of it. You know, that box of cereal that costs now $4 or $5 says it'll feed 13 servings.
Right.
I'm like, I don't know whose kids y'all are feeding, but I would never send one box of cereal if I had 13 kids over for breakfast. But you make a dozen muffins, or say 12 kids. Dozen muffins, they might eat two, you know, depends on the age, but they'd stay with you a lot longer. So it's cheaper. So anyway, now in your teenage years, you played professional paintball.
Yes.
And we have a paintball story. Some of your paintball friends, and these are guys. I just want to make that clarification. These are extreme sports guys that don't typically notice things like that, but they actually noticed a difference in you and your brother Joshua.
They did, yeah. So grew up starting in kind of early teens, 14, 15, somewhere in there. Started getting into paintball. We found some friends that were getting into paintball, and those that aren't super familiar with paintball, it's you shoot these pellets or
paintballs.
These paintballs. Yeah, these
balls
little balls.
Paint.
Think bath beads.
Yeah,
about that size, and you shoot them at high velocity, and they hit your body and pop, and it leaves paint and it leaves welts, and sometimes they can cause bleeding, and any fun sport that a young teenager would want to get into.
I know.
So playing paintball, you get these welts and bruises, and
sometimes it wasn't just a few. If you got what you call bunkered. I mean, I remember one time your back or Joshua's back was covered, and I'm like, I hope he doesn't have to go to the doctor because this is going to look very suspicious, like child abuse. I mean, they were bruises, welts, bleeding. Yeah. Yep.
They were, and so we would always just have those. We got to where we were playing every weekend, and so you'd get 20, 30 of these welts all over your body just from playing, and something that our even our teammates noticed. And you're talking, once we got to this level, we were 18, 19. And kind of in the early 20s also.
Independent
guys.
Yeah.
This is considered an extreme sport. It kind of gets lumped in there with like skateboarding and surfing and kind of that crowd. And even our older teammates were like, how come you and your brother, how come the welts don't stay on your body as long?
Faster.
They heal much faster than mine. So we would have, we get this welt, and by the next week, generally when we go and play again, it would, clean slate.
Right.
We'd be just fine, and we wouldn't have the welts anymore. No scars, not really, no. And so, but then, our teammates would have scarring and welts that would last a month. Sometimes the scarring was permanent. I mean, it was, anytime it broke skin, you could see that from a year ago, you could see welts.
Yeah. I remember one, I think it was Ryan. came to Dad and asked him, is there something in this bread? I mean, he attributed the bread. Is there something in this bread that make Josh and David's welts and sores heal faster than ours?
Yep.
And he noticed, and I've just never forgotten that. I'm like, wow, for a 19-year-old boy, man, I mean, I'll call him a boy, young man, to notice that. But
yeah, I mean, when
you're pulling your jersey off each week and they're like, whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah, and you're talking, 15 to 20 players on the team.
Yeah.
And the two brothers, they're the outlier.
Yes.
They're the ones that are different. Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Of course, it doesn't hurt that, at World Cup every year, we would get a house and y'all would come down and cook for everybody.
Yes,
and with that came the bread. So they're like, wow, the Becker bread, that's something different.
Yes.
So.
Oh, those were fun days. We rent that big old house and every meal we would cook for your team. And what, it was a week?
It was. We were down there for a week.
And we would cook breakfast, lunch, and dinner and pizza night and make all the bread. And they seem to love it. So that's my encouragement to people is, you'd be surprised. The kids will love it. The kids will love it. So.
And that's just going back to another one of those moments where you don't realize what you grow up with until your friends tell you. They're like, you eat like this every day? This is what you grew up with? And I just assumed, I assumed every kid grew up, fresh bread and fresh meals and
don't you?
Baked from scratch, nothing out of a box.
I know. I'll never forget one of your friends from the paintball team, Ryan. I think he was quite notable.
He was an inquisitive buddy.
And I remember him opening the refrigerator and goes, there's nothing in here to eat. and you have your milk in a pickle jar. We had the glass jars that we took to get our milk in. But what he meant was there's tons to eat. I mean, other than the bread, but most things you had to make it.
There were ingredients for a lot of things.
Yes. Yep. There wasn't just packaged stuff sitting around that you could just eat.
Exactly.
So, I mean, there were fruit and bread, of course, but I've just never forgotten that, seeing him standing in a refrigerator that's always full of something. But he's like, you have nothing to eat. So anyway, but now in 2006, we bought a bakery. And in the last few years before the bakery closed, you ran the bakery. Solo, and you sold bread at farmers markets. So you met a lot of folks like I meet here at Bread Becker's, and I know you have a few It's the Bread stories from those days. Is there one or two that stick out in your mind the most?
Yeah.
I know, like I said, you've met lots of
people. I'm
always amazed at the ones I remember and think to tell today.
So the one that I remember that stands out just instantly when you say that. It was, I used to do a farmer's market every single Saturday. I mean, we did lots of farmer's markets, but one particular, it was about an hour away. So it was a pretty long drive. I did that market for about 2 years. And there was this young couple. Now this was in the height of gluten-free.
Yes.
And you would get, at the farmer's market, this community was very like health driven and health oriented and, nothing was better than Trader Joe's and Whole Foods. And so, I remember, setting up my table with the freshly ground bread. I had it all out and people would like jeer and snicker and be like, why is a bread place even in a farmer's market? Bread's not healthy. Why are you like, people would hiss at you when they walked past. It was weird.
The ones that didn't know.
The ones that didn't know. Yeah.
It was a great market.
They didn't realize it. It was a very, very good market. And so being there long enough, I had to, it came with the education. You have to tell people why you're different. And so this one young couple, they came up and they had a daughter. I think she was, 6 or 7, somewhere in there. And they came up and they're like, listen, we're having this issue. And I was talking. I'm one of 9 kids and I talk pretty loud because the quiet chick doesn't get the worms. So so I'm talking. To the crowd that's there. And
you've heard my poopy talk a few times.
Yep,
and
a few times.
Of white flour.
And the history of white flour. And that ties in with the bread that I sold. So I was just telling people why my bread was different. Well, they happened to be standing there when I was discussing it. Well, they said, our daughter here, is just in agony all the time. Anytime she has any bread or any grain product, she immediately vomits from it. She is so sick. She has such a gluten intolerance. The doctors just say to stay away from bread, stay away from wheat. And I mean, she eats sandwiches for lunch. Like it's just,
she wants it.
She wants the sandwiches. And so we don't know what to do. And so
the gluten-free bread was the best, but it still is not that soft texture that kids want their sandwiches.
Gluten-free is always going to be on the denser side.
Right.
And so, and my predominant ingredient was sorghum, which is kind of in the corn family. So it was kind of a cornbready almost. So it wasn't the best for sandwiches that kids want to have. So anyway, long story short, I was explaining the differences in the bread that I made and the concept of freshly ground whole grains. And they said, well, you know what? It's Saturday. We'll take some home. We'll try it tonight. That way, in case she has a reaction, she has all day tomorrow, Sunday, to recover before she goes to school on Monday the next day. And so I sent them on their way. They got a loaf of, I think, a plain bread, and then I think a cinnamon raisin bread for breakfast.
That was my favorite.
And so, I thought nothing of it. Finished the rest of the market, came back the following week, set up my stuff, started, selling the bread, talking to people. And lo and behold, the young girl comes, bounding up to the table with a giant grin on her face. And I had talked to them for a little while that week before. And so she goes, Mr. David, I had a sandwich for lunch every single day and I never got sick.
Hallelujah.
It was things like that is when it hits you that like
you're making a difference
and you're changing people's lives and you don't realize it when you grow up in it. You just think that it's the normal, but when you hear people that's like, and the parents were almost in tears. They're like, we didn't know what to do. We didn't know what to do. And doctors aren't really they're just saying eliminate that whole thing. And so when you have a solution, it's just, the smile on her face, I'll never forget. And so they came back every week and they got a loaf of the sandwich bread and a loaf of the raisin bread and
every week.
And she would even, while the parents were off doing the rest of their shopping, she would stand at the table, work at the booth. She'd be like, you don't understand. Cause then some other family would come up and be like, no, you don't understand. I can't eat wheat. I can't eat gluten. I can't. And she goes, I said that too. And I can have it. And she would just go and go. And they're like, who is this, your daughter? Who is this? And I'm like,
pay her?
No, it's just someone that got bread.
I remember meeting her because I did the market with you a couple of times, or for you even. And I think Dad said he was there the week she came back and was so excited to be able to do this. And, and that's the thing. It's not like you're trying to sell something to somebody. It can change your life.
Right. And, it's a lifestyle.
And we hear that all the time, though. People that think they can't eat wheat or need to be gluten-free. And there's some that probably can't, but it's really a very small percentage. But when I hear the stories of people that say they can eat this, it's not just that they can tolerate it without throwing up. They get well. They get healed. It starts helping other issues in their life. So, and I've also found over the years, the more restrictive your diet starts out, the more restrictive it becomes. The next thing you can't eat this. I'll never forget, and I always point to a section in the classroom because a lady came up to me in class and said she was down to 7 foods that she could eat. 7 foods. 7 out of the hundreds that God has given us, thousands that God has given us. And she said, now that I've started the bread, I can eat most anything. And it's healing. It's healing to the gut. So that's just so exciting.
And we get testimonies all the time. You know, I had warts, which I was the child that had warts in your wart story. And they go away, and we get the, lowering the cholesterol, and we get the, I pooped today and it was great. It's like, well, that's great. I'm so proud of you.
Yes. But, or I only pooped 3 times today instead of 10.
Yeah.
That's the, I have my life back. I can leave the house.
But then you also get the, your teenage friend. How come your welts disappear quicker? And how come, when our whole team gets sick, you're only sick for a couple of days, but we have to skip 2 weeks of practice because we're still like those kind of things. It's the bread. It's gotta be the bread. I mean, I know sometimes it's a broken record, but those are some of the more obscure things that people just don't realize. When you're eating healthy, when you're eating real things, all the other dominoes start falling, and it just kind of, I don't know how else to explain it.
The thing about the bread to me, as all these years of studying, is just about every nutrient there to sustain your life and build your health is in grains, not just bread, but it's in whole grains.
Right.
I mean, I think A, C, D, which A and C get from your fruits and vegetables, D get from your sunshine.
Yep.
And B12 and one of the amino acids is slightly low. It's there, but it's just amazing. And if you could only eat one thing, I would say eat bread.
Eat bread.
Don't take it
Absolutely.
out. And that's what is so troubling to me is this whole throwing grain out the window. I'm like, you're eliminating the most nutritious, nutrient-dense food group God has given us. So is there any other stories that that come to your mind that
I mean, that's
questions that you're now getting in the store or things you're seeing?
Yeah, that's the big one. And I'll tell you, I mean, that was the one that really stood out to me because I'm sick all the time. I don't know what to do.
And this is a kid.
This is a kid.
child.
This is a child. Yep. And you know, the countless times that same story would happen. Especially doing the farmers markets because you're actually giving them the bread. You know, sometimes here in the store you show someone and it's like, here's the, you know, you want to get started, here's the grain, make the flour, try some muffins.
Yeah.
And they may come back a next couple of weeks later and they're like, I did it and it was awesome and I've noticed the change. You get that story I countless times. I can't even count how many times
I know.
that people have that exact same thing happen. And it
makes it exciting what we do.
It's exciting. It's exciting we've been in business, 33 years, I think, and we haven't changed our teaching.
That is something that's really
nothing has changed.
Hit me in the last few years because it's scientific. It's just what it is. I'm not changing the diet. It's just, this is it.
Yep.
I think our free CD that we give away, I think that was recorded in 1993, I believe.
Yep.
It's the
and we
same
still
message.
give it out. We give out the exact same message.
Yeah.
Yep. People are like, what CD? What is a CD?
Yeah.
It's like, well, before that it was a cassette tape.
And now it's a podcast.
And now it's a podcast.
Yes,
Yep.
so,
but the information has not changed. It's still relevant today.
So I always, whenever I interview my guest, and you're my guest today, I always like to say, is there some final word of encouragement you would like to say to the listeners, to share with them?
You gotta just try it. You gotta just try it. A lot of things, the big excuse, especially this day and age, you just get, everyone's on their apps and phones and busy lifestyle and everything's going on. I don't have time to make bread. What do you mean you mill your flour? Do you live on a farm? Like, what does that even look like?
Yeah.
And people just think they don't have time to do it. And it's such an easy adaptation to your lifestyle where once you learn how to do it and once you get it, it's no different than, making bread with store-bought flour. You just take an extra 30 seconds. In fact, it's quicker because you're not driving to the store to get your flour. It's there.
And if time is really the issue, there's equipment now. I mean, the mill grinds a pound in 30 seconds, and that's, a pound and a half is all it takes to make my basic recipe.
Exactly.
And then the bread machine, 5 minutes to throw the ingredients in, hit a button and come back. 3 hours, maybe 2.5.
Sure.
But you got to bake loaves of bread.
But it makes it for you completely.
Yeah. Everybody's got 5 minutes.
Everybody's got 5 minutes to throw the ingredients in there.
Max.
Absolutely.
And the muffins are stir up in 10 minutes.
The muffins, the pancakes,
bacon.
The brownies.
Yeah,
I
so
mean,
easy.
Do little things.
When I ask you that question of what's one last word, I was just thinking, just do it. Just try it.
Just try it.
We don't have a bakery anymore. We do not sell bread here at Bread Becker's. We do teach you how to make bread for yourselves because that was what God spoke to me in the beginning because I was trying to make bread for people in the neighborhood and everybody I knew and selling bread a little bit. And one day I just was worn out with 6 children. I'd had my 6th child at that point. And I just met Dad in the driveway and said, I don't think I'm supposed to make bread for the world. I think I'm supposed to teach the world to make bread for themselves. So
That's
now
right.
you're carrying on that tradition and teaching classes. And with the new baby coming, I have a feeling you're going to be bringing little Teddy up on real bread because you know the difference.
I know the difference.
When you eat it and when you don't. So
Absolutely.
I thank you for all that you do here at Bread Becker's to encourage others in this journey, helping them to see how easy it is to make bread and incorporate it into busy lifestyles. And so I just want to say I hope everyone listening today has enjoyed my time with my son David. He didn't disclose too much bad stuff on me. So until next time, this is Sue Becker from Bread Becker's with Sue's Healthy Minutes.
Sue's Healthy Minutes podcast has been a presentation by the Bread Beckers Incorporated, located in Woodstock, Georgia. For more information, store hours, and learning opportunities, visit breadbeckers.com and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast and never miss an episode. Share this with 2 friends who would benefit from this information, and be sure to join us again next week for more of Sue's Healthy Minutes.